Have you ever been through a genuinely hard time, a period of loss, confusion, or pain, and someone, with the best of intentions, says something that just makes everything worse? Everything happens for a reason. God is just testing you. Look on the bright side, it could be worse. These phrases, meant to be comforting, often land like stones. They can feel dismissive, simplistic, and leave you feeling more alone than you did before. This experience of well-meaning but painful advice is a story as old as time. It was written down 2,500 years ago in the book of Job. We all know the outline of Job's suffering. But today, we're not talking about Job. We're talking about his friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, 3 men who have become a timeless symbol for how to get it wrong. This video is an investigation into the heresy of Job's friends. We will break down their flawed arguments, show why their good intentions created a cruel and false theology, and reveal why God himself ultimately condemned their counsel at the end of the book. The story begins with an act of true compassion. After Job has lost his children, his wealth, and his health, his 3 friends journey to be with him. When they see him from a distance, so disfigured by grief and illness they can barely recognize him, they weep. They tear their robes, sprinkle dust on their heads, and then they do the single most profound and helpful thing in the entire book. They sit with him in the ashes in total silence. For 7 days and 7 nights, this silence is not awkward. It is sacred. It is a shared presence in the face of suffering that is too immense for words. They don't offer platitudes. They don't try to explain it. They simply bear witness to his pain. This is the pinnacle of friendship. But after 7 days, the silence breaks, and so does their wisdom. Job is the first to speak. He doesn't curse God. Instead, with a torrent of heartbreaking poetry, he curses the day of his own birth. "Let the day perish on which I was born," he cries. "Why did I not die at birth, come out from the womb and expire? For now I would be lying down in peace. I would be asleep and at rest." His raw, honest, and unfiltered grief makes his friends deeply uncomfortable. It doesn't fit into their neat and tidy worldview. And so, one by one, they decide they must correct him. They must explain his suffering. This brings us to the core error that all 3 friends share. It's a foundational piece of bad theology known as the Retribution Principle. It's a simple, tidy formula. God is just. Therefore, good people are always blessed with prosperity, and suffering is always a direct punishment for sin. Since you, Job, are suffering, you must have sinned. It's a neat equation that makes the universe feel predictable and safe. But when applied to the messy reality of human suffering, it becomes an instrument of cruelty. First to speak is Eliphaz the mystic. He is the gentlest, the most diplomatic, and perhaps the most insidious. He begins by asking permission to speak. "If one ventures a word with you, will you be impatient?" Then he bases his authority not on scripture or reason, but on a private spiritual experience. He describes a terrifying vision in the night where a spirit glided past his face, telling him that no mortal can be pure before God. From this, concludes that Job, too, must be flawed. He tells Job, "Behold, blessed is the one whom God reproves. Therefore despise not the discipline of the Almighty." He's packaging his accusation as a gentle piece of spiritual advice. He's the friend who tells you your suffering is actually a secret blessing, a lesson from the universe, if you'd only be humble enough to see it. Job's response is one of pure anguish. He essentially says, "You cannot comprehend my pain. My grief is heavier than the sand of the sea. The arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit drinks their poison." He rejects Eliphaz's soft-spoken mystical platitudes as useless in the face of real agony. Next comes Bildad, the traditionalist. He has no time for visions. He appeals to history and the wisdom of the ancients. "For inquire, please, of bygone ages," he commands, "and consider what their fathers have searched out." His argument is that tradition has already settled this matter. The world works in a predictable way, and a man like Job doesn't suffer unless he deserves it. Bildad is harsher than Eliphaz. He explicitly suggests Job's children died for their own sins, and then tells Job to his face, "If you are pure and upright, surely then he will rouse himself for you." He represents rigid, unthinking dogma. His message is, it's your fault, and all of history proves it. Job's lived experience is irrelevant when compared to the weight of tradition. By now, Job is growing frustrated. He responds to them, I have heard many such things. Miserable comforters are you all. Shall windy words have an end? But the worst is yet to come. Finally, we have Zophar the dogmatist. He is the most brutal of the three. He drops all pretense of compassion. He opens his speech by mocking Job's grief. Should a multitude of words go unanswered and a man full of talk be vindicated? He directly accuses Job of being a liar, a man whose sins are hidden from view. His argument culminates in one of the cruelest lines in the book. He tells Job, know then that God exacts of you less than your guilt deserves. He represents fundamentalism without a heart, a man who loves his theological system more than the suffering person in front of him. His message is simple. It's your fault, and you should be grateful it's not worse. For 30 chapters, these friends hammered Job with this same relentless argument. But just when you think the debate is over, a mysterious fourth figure appears. A young, angry man named Elihu. He has been listening silently, and he is furious with everyone. He believes the three friends are wrong for condemning Job, but he also believes Job is wrong for declaring his own righteousness. Elihu's theology is more sophisticated. He argues that suffering isn't always a punishment for past sins, but can be a form of correction or purification from God to prevent future sins. It's a more nuanced argument, but it is delivered with the breathtaking arrogance of youth. And ultimately, despite his long and passionate speeches, when God finally appears, he doesn't even acknowledge that Elihu exists. Elihu represents the failure of even the most sophisticated human attempt to explain away the mystery of suffering. After all, the human wisdom has been exhausted. God finally speaks to Job from the whirlwind. But after he finishes his famous speech, he turns his divine attention to Eliphaz. And his verdict is stunning. He says, my anger burns against you and your two friends, for you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. This is the shocking, revolutionary climax of the entire debate. God condemns the pious friends who spent 30 chapters defending his honor with their neat, tidy, and cruel theology. And he vindicates the suffering man who spent 30 chapters questioning him, arguing with him and screaming his honest pain into the silence. Job, with all his messy, borderline blasphemous grief, spoke more rightly of God than his friends did with their perfect, orthodox arguments. Why? Because Job was honest. He engaged with the real, terrifying, and mysterious God. While his friends defended a small, predictable idol of their own making, the heresy of Job's friends, then, is the well-intentioned but deeply arrogant belief that we can and should always explain another person's suffering. It is the prideful attempt to reduce the terrifying mystery of God's ways to a simple formula that makes us feel safe and in control. So the next time you are with someone who is going through a fire, remember the lesson of Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. Remember that the wisest and most compassionate thing they did was that first week, when they simply sat with their friend in the silence.